I want my Nickelback, 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 Nickelback ribs. So right now we're trying the ring light. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Rock Show with Connor Farrell. Of course, the Rock Show with Connor Farrell. But once again, we got the ring light. We're trying out the ring-a-ding-ding light. And it's funny because I've got it set up where this is technically like my secondary camera, but it doesn't let me see what it looks like. And so I don't know if this looks good or if, like, what if my head's cut off right now? I would have no way of knowing. And I don't. And I don't. And if my head is cut off here, well, then we'll do another podcast. And I got a very janky, I believe, I don't know if gimbal is the right word. I'm looking at myself in the camera. I don't know if gimbal is the right word. You may have noticed my hair is drying. It's a hair drying episode from The Shower. The Shower. You hear about that, kids. Now, here we have a little gift for you. It is, if you're an audio listener, you might not be privy, but it is in fact a tripod, a very bendy tripod setup that I seem to be using here. My phone is just barely too big with the case, just barely too big to properly situate inside of the tripod holster. One might put it. One might put it like that. I got the Michael set up. I got the mic, and I've got the ring light. Now, what do we want to talk about? Right? Let's think about it. Let's think about it. What are we going to talk about? What do I want to talk about? I want to like clean up my Twitter, my X profile, and I want to just like take down. Like I have a lot of uh, not a lot, but I got a lot of like random kind of like rambly type of like just like thoughts and ideas and like stuff that are lyrics that came to me, and I posted them, and then I'm like, I'd rather keep my feed kind of more like clean and curated and kind of straight to the point. Like Instagram, I like just posting like memes and stuff. Um, and that's kind of more my venue. But I think with Twitter, I'm definitely going to want to just like have the podcast. Yeah, because then that's a third place I'm posting. So I want to upload the podcast to YouTube, Spotify, and X. And I think that's like a good, couple of places to have a video podcast. And then what did I say? My goal is 2,000 viewers an episode. And so I think if I have three different platforms, it's a lot easier to get like, especially starting out, probably I imagine I'll get more views on X. Um, Probably a decent amount on Spotify, and then YouTube will probably take the longest to build, but I think it'll become the biggest once it is built. I don't know how big the Spotify audience is going to be. That'll be interesting. Um, there's a couple things I saw and or watched and or listened to in the last day or couple of days or two. And one of them is I was watching, I think it was like Love to Hate or Hate to Love. It was a Nickelback documentary. And basically, honestly, what I took away from it was like, there's nothing to it, in the sense that you get a band together, you play music, you like doing it, you record it, you put it out, you play for people, you get it in front of people, right? Now I'm sitting up. It's gonna be funny because in the one camera, the really bad camera, I look like horrible. This looks awful, and I might look awful in this one. Either way, I'm posting it. That's gonna be hysterical. Um, but yeah, and it's so funny. But I probably look like because this is the blah 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 blah. One moment. Yeah, that's just kind of the way audio video stuff tends to work. Is that what ends up like looking awkward and feeling awkward as the performer, especially initially, is usually exactly what looks amazing, right? When you're on stage, I did a lot of school plays, right? I did a lot of improv comedy, high school improv comedy showcases and shows and competitions against other schools and troops. And I played obviously a lot playing music. And what's funny is what what I remember the reason I'm saying that is the first thing that's kind of interesting when you're just starting out is realizing that it looks really good when there's a gazibble of light on you. Um, and that's true. But as the performer, it feels very awkward and it looks very bad, especially when we're doing musicals and plays and things like that. And I was doing that through the high school theater program. You would have to put on so much makeup, amount of makeup that is like double what you would do if you were just talking to someone. But when you're on stage, if you want to accentuate your facial characteristics and you want people to be able to pick up on the funny little ooh, huh, the little intricacies in the way that your face is moving. If you want people to be able to pick up on that, it's easier, especially with all that light. You got to really exaggerate the makeup, and then it ends up looking normal from the audience perspective. But if you walked up real close to that person right after the performance, you'd be like, "Oh, whoa, this looks weird," and it does. I wonder if that's how Kiss and Guar feel. Kiss and Guar. Guar and Kiss. Kiss and Guar. Guar and Kiss. Alice Cooper? Who knows? Don't miss. And so so the Nickelback thing. And then I was listening to Professor Andrew Huberman from Stanford being interviewed by Lex Friedman. Uh, and yeah, it was very interesting because there's a unique interplay of balancing different interests, approaches, and mindsets, right? When you're looking at the intersection of lifestyles. In this case, it's, the DIY, punk, rock, that kind of scene, right? And, also the more academic, scientific, not academic in the sense that, oh, it's all college, but like the science and evidence and like people who are interested, broadly speaking, nerd, right? But if you're talking in the more clinical, like dry, what other people would see as boring, but for me is like kind of stimulating and very like interesting. When you're working with that very kind of scientific, nerdy lifestyle and set of interests in everything, that accompanies that. And then you also look at the intersection with, rock and roll and that ethos and, kind of the different implicit but also explicit dogmas and things that people attach themselves to. When you're looking at that, it really gets to be interesting. And then a third thing you throw in there is fitness, longevity, exercise, and then kind of a fourth thing you could put on is success, broadly speaking, however you define that, right? But it tends to be, in this case, monetary success in terms of leading or organizing or working on a business venture as more of an entrepreneurial success. So you're talking scientific nerd, you're talking, punk DIY rock, you're talking fitness and health and athleticism, and then you're also talking entrepreneurship. And a lot of those things, what's very common in those different groups, when it comes to thoughts, or at least what is widely gathered from, viewing, media content online and what people are publishing and posting, but also, my experience from talking to different people in person, at the gym, at shows, at different things is, people have these different mindsets at university, and whenever talking to anyone who runs a business, what you get is you get a lot of these different between the different lifestyles, you get different mentalities and paradigms and frameworks for thinking about and contextualizing your endeavors within that realm, right? And so if you look at something like entrepreneurship, you get the very Alex Hormozy, acquisition.com, Jim Launch, that whole kind of thing. And a lot of his, kind of philosophies and ideas about how to approach things. And it's just kind of interesting because when I see like mental health and I see stuff like that, um, you know, not really a cautionary tale, but just kind of like a case of like, if I really cared about and I wanted to index on, right? So I've got 4 different, maybe not competing interests, but I've got different buckets of interest, right? And let's say you could put all your energy into one to try and maximize at the cost of the others, right? And then let's say another approach is you maximize in 2 and they get to maybe 90%, where I guess you could in terms of input output, just generally speaking, and the other 2 kind of like suffer or relax. So then there's, you put it into 3 and then you put it all into 4. And, let's say you could do 80%, 90% success in 4 different things that you're really passionate about. But to do 101, you have to sacrifice the other 3. And so that appears to be like Alex Hormozy. And then the mindsets and frameworks and ways of valuing what is and isn't worth your time and your consideration and your thoughts and how you kind of organize your life. It's very different depending on if you're prioritizing one pursuit or 4. Let's do glorious B words, as Tarantino made that movie, or 3 or 2 or 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Depending on what your paradigm is and what you existentially ascribe value to, which is like weird. But also, there's probably a genetic hardwired component to that too, right? Kind of who you are and what things are valuable to you and what you put priority on. And so I know I've said a lot of words without saying a lot, but let's cut to the chase. In that regard, I'll take that criticism that I'm giving myself. But let's see. Okay, so you've got, so this is something where I saw Andrew Huberman kind of dealing with these different things and a little bit Lex Friedman. I've got an analytical mind, but also a very emotional, introverted and extroverted, kind of proclivities, proclivities to me. My mood can fluctuate moment to moment, and so it's having, and so that's the thing is, as someone, and so this is what's interesting is I think I'm very sensitive to a lot of stimuli, external and internal, and also I process and I go through external and internal stimuli very quickly, as well. And so I think that's just genetically how I'm hardwired. But, that means I've got a unique set of problems, so to speak. I've got a unique sense of response feedback and things that cause other things, right? So sometimes when I'm talking to people, I think they're just wired differently. And what strategies and frameworks and mantras to tell themselves and what I tell myself, and which ones are productive and useful and actually work, help me make me feel better, or at least in the desired headspace for what I'm, attempting to perform or accomplish, right? And so, because sometimes, no, like if you want to get on stage, you want to perform, what might be good for one performer, which is like calming down, taking a moment, really appreciating things, and then going on stage. Someone else, it might be not thinking about it and just showing up and going, right? Someone might have a ritual. Some people might be good to do 18,000 shows a night. People might be doing it once a week. For me, I imagine, I mean, I don't know. I have no clue, but I'm attempting right now with podcasting. I realized a good framework that I got from this Andrew Huberman Lex Friedman talk was what Lex is doing. Actually, not what Andrew was doing, but what Lex was saying he does. Lex Lex Friedman, Lexus Friedman, a lot of people like Lexus, poor little Lexus Friedman. Uh, that's my impression of how the Orange Man would describe Lex Friedman if he was. Look at little Lexus. That's what they call him because he's a robot. Look at him. He's basically programmed. He's a car. Lexus Friedman. People are really sick of that voice by now. They're really sick of that. Not his voice. Some people, I'm certain, everyone, but people are really, they're over the Trump impression, and that's a very divisive thing, much more than him. You know, Trump's very divisive, but the most divisive thing in the world is doing a shoddy impression and then insisting on maintaining the impression for a considerable duration of time. Doing it all throughout a conversation, doing it all throughout the months, all throughout years. It's like, when's it going to stop? What's up with the frequency of this, huh? What's up with the periodicity? It's a super short period on how often the Trump impression comes out. And how do you contend with that? And so, so you're looking at things. And so I was talking about how Lex Friedman, deals with kind of organizing activities and his framework. This is this concept of frameworks. I think people are wired differently, and different frameworks are useful, broadly speaking, contingent on the wiring, right? So for different, I guess you could say, I don't know, maybe not archetype, but different. They say, different people say introvert, extrovert, all these different paradigms. But I think, I think whatever framework, whatever paradigm. I guess I'm trying to think of a. Why I don't guess. I know I'm trying to. I'm not trying. I am. It's funny when you listen to the things you say and you think, that's inaccurate, right? Like, I'm trying to think about it. It's like, are you trying or are you thinking about it? You're thinking about something with the goal of reaching a solution or reaching a certain way of thinking about something, but that's actually not you trying to do something. You are doing something with a goal. You're not trying to do it. You are doing it. So it's very, there's an interesting distinction between things. And so this is kind of something I kind of am harkening back to. I think broadly speaking, people have different things that work for them, right? They have different frameworks for analyzing and assessing what the response should be to internal and external stimulus, right? Your internal thoughts, your external interactions, your internal interactions, your external thoughts, right? The ones that you share with other people and collaborate with other people in conversation you come up with. And so people have different ways of approaching things, different ways of thinking about things, right? That are useful for those people based off of, I would say, probably mostly nature rather than nurture, right? The way they're born, genetically speaking, their genetics rather than their experiences. But that's the interesting thing is, like, someone like me, I've never thought of myself as a person who would ever be like depressed. And I don't think, here's what I think I got myself into a trap of doing. I got myself into a trap of having these negative thought patterns, things that were excessively paranoid, anxious, negative, downright cruel, mean things to say. Like, if I had a small child I was taking care of and they said something and these were my responses, it would be cruel and it would be heartless and it would be reprehensible. But for some reason, when you're saying these as responses to your own ideas and your own thoughts and impulses, and your impulses to be this incessantly cruel to yourself, internally speaking, it's harder to realize that, like, oh, this is irrational, cruel behavior. This is not right. This is messed up. It's uncool. And so I got myself into a pattern where I was behaving in ways, or basically I trained myself that my impulse to any thought was a more negative, a more just push through, just grit through for the sake of it. There's no reason to enjoy anything. Everything is work, including relaxation. It's something that just begets another thing to beget another thing, because none of it's worth doing it for its own sake. It's all to beget something else. And living in the future and also living in the past, but really none of those exist. You only ever do live in the present. And so this is kind of where I kind of so to end that little story is I ended up having these negative impulses and thought patterns, and my instincts had kind of been trained, my habits. That's what it is. I had these negative habits, and I had these just unuseful habits, I would say, dishonest habits, right? Or habits that would reinforce dishonest narratives, about just everything, right? So it'd be like the fact that, like, well, that doesn't really matter. But the whole idea is I had these negative, these untruthful thought patterns that, you could say I couldn't escape. That's not true. I had thought patterns that I was sitting in because my impulses pulled me into them and kept me in them. These habits, these mental, linguistic, these narrative habits, these responses to questions I would ask myself, all of these things started to push me into a direction, to push me into these things that aren't true, and then to sit in them. And, you never want to, anytime you ever feel like a victim and you feel like someone else is a villain, realize it's originating from a lie. Think about that. Anytime you feel like you are a victim being victimized, and or someone else is a villain out to do you harm, right? Or to just do harm onto others, that feeling, that emotion that is arising within you or moving through you, it is being spurred on from being told a lie. Really, a sequence of lies or a narrative of lies, a false narrative. False narrative of reality is that you're a victim and other people are victims and other people are villains. There are people that are evil, but no one ever sees themselves as a villain. Do you ever realize that, right? And so, and I guess you could attempt to do this victimizer narrative, which, in a sense is kind of if you read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, that's kind of a little bit the framework, is that it's all oppressed and oppressor. But the thing is, especially if you're speaking about wanting to enjoy life, it's not a framework through which you can do that. And I think it's a lie. I think it's a lie that people are victims and villains. I think it's a lie. I think it's a lie. You're not a victim. I'm not stuck in a thought. I'm a victim. And myself, my own conscience, is the villain. No, it's habits. What's true, when you're being honest to yourself, what the true narrative of things is actually much more typically less glamorous, salacious. It's very, very, very blasé. It's very normal. It tends to be that, like, look at my case. What? Oh, I just had developed bad habits. And I was being negative. And I was being mean to myself. Is it because there's a subconscious person in me? There's two different people, and the one wolf is my inner lazy, mean, negative person, like David Goggins would say, and the other one is Goggins. He gets after it, right? There's the whiner and the person who wants to tell you all these lies to make you weak, and the other person who just does what they do, and you have to conquer. The strong one has to conquer the weak, evil one. You have an angel that has to conquer the devil, and they're both inside you. It's a useful framework, right? That can be a useful framework, for different people and different mindsets. But I think if you're looking outside of what's a useful framework for different people based on the subject, right? Subjectively speaking, if you aren't looking at subjective and you're looking at just what's objectively true across people, it's that there isn't a moralization, right? There isn't some good or evil or bad or harm. It tends to be there's incentives, there's pretty much it tends to be that. It tends to be, without overcomplicating things, needlessly, there's incentives, right? A quick escape to figuring out long-term things that I didn't want to was to say negative things. And so then that forms as a habit. It was an incentive. It was to escape having to deal with things and confront myself, which would be scary at the time. So instead, I tried to avoid what I feared by having an easy out, an escape hatch. But really, almost any time you think you've got an escape hatch from something you fear, a thought you fear, or realizations you fear, or things you fear, even thinking about, usually you don't. You have something that's going to compound. You found a way to make things worse for yourself. So usually it's better to confront those things head on. But I'm not going to say they always are, because that's not what I did. And this, a similar idea is when you talk about regret, right? I would have done something differently. Really? Because we know what you would do with the thoughts, the impulses, and the decision-making you would have right then. Because it's the decision-making, thought process, and impulses you did have right then. And so what you thought was the most logical thing to go do is the thing you went and did. Right? By definition, everything you did is what you would have done. Think about it. Everything you have ever done is what you would have done at that moment, because that's what you did. Right? And so this is where you get it. This is where you get, like, living in the past and living in the future. They're lies. They're not true. They don't make sense. They objectively don't make sense, right? If someone says, oh, I would have done this in the past. Oh, I should have dated Sally. Why did I take Sally out for a date? Oh, I feel so bad. I would have took Sally. No, you wouldn't have. Because you didn't. You didn't do that. You know why? Because you weren't going to. Because you decided you weren't going to, and then you didn't. That's how things work. You decide you're not going to do them on some level. On some level, you decide, I'm not going to do that, and then you don't do it. Or else you would have done it. If you would have decided you were going to do it, then you would have done it. Right? So when people talk about decisions or decision-making or any of these things, you look at what you do. It's all present. It's all present. The only moment you actually have is the one you're in. This moment right now, I'm talking to the camera. See, the future where this video that I'm recording right now, this podcast, is uploaded, doesn't exist. It's not real. The past where I took a shower isn't real. Right? I can't say I would have showered differently or shaved after I showered instead of shaving before. Because I didn't. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And to say this podcast is going to do this well or this well, I don't know. There's possibilities and probabilities, to quote George Gammon, who is a macroeconomist. There's only possibilities and probabilities. So if you're projecting into the future, you once again can't say what exists and what doesn't exist because it doesn't. They talk about Heisenberg uncertainty. They talk about the observer effect, that something's in a box and you don't know. It is both dead and alive at the moment that it's still a sealed box until it's revealed. Now, interestingly, you're thinking until it's observed. Well, that's the same thing with the future. Until it is the present, it doesn't exist. Until the future is the present, it doesn't exist, right? And the past doesn't exist either. And this is in the sense that in your brain, the past doesn't exist. And in your brain, the future doesn't exist. And to you as a person, your experience of reality, the past and the future, they don't exist. They're not places you can experience. They're not places you can live. They're not places you can tell useful narratives or stories about yourself to yourself, right? There's a Jordan Peterson thing, self-authoring. And, it can be useful to write about your past and your future. But honestly, I think that's for some people. I think that's for some people. And I think, broadly speaking, the past isn't real, and there isn't utility in going back there, broadly speaking, for everyone. Now, for some people, with how they're wired and where they're at that moment, mentally speaking, does it make sense? Maybe. Depends on the person, right? And same with the future and writing these grand tales of the future. But I realize for me, someone who processes and goes through information so fast, it's not a useful framework. None of this and this is what I'm going to do, and New Rock Dynasty is going to do this, and it's going to be a record label, or actually we're mostly going to do live music stuff, or actually we're mostly going to contract with musicians to do their podcast stuff. It's going to be a podcast studio mostly, and we're going to do this, and this is who we're going to work with, and this is what's going to happen 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 1 year from now. Or I'm going to do a podcast with X, Y, and Z, and it's going to blow up, and it's going to do this, and then this is what's going to happen for a career. Let's say I did plan on that. Let's say I banked on, I'm going to do a podcast with Bert Kreischer, and it's going to blow up, and then he's going to get me all these different big, famous, successful guests, and people are going to believe in the mission of New Rock Dynasty and bringing rock. And, why wait 12 years for rock to reach the stage comedy's at? Why not kickstart it so that it happens within the next year, right? Even if everyone loves that mission, I, do podcasts with these giant guests and people, and they believe in the mission, and they bring me on, and then I start getting, and I continue to get these big guests. It doesn't guarantee the podcast is going to be super successful within, a year. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Anything, or most things, I want to be accurate. Most things tend to work over time. In the sense that most things tend to be a sure thing when looked at as being performed consistently over a decade. Think about it. If I moved to Austin and I go and do comedy open mics, I do 5 minutes of mics every night. For 10 years, after 10 years, you're going to be a good comedian. And probably you're also going to be a touring comedian. You're probably going to be a comedian with a pretty big platform. If I come on here and say the goal is to do a minimum of 5 minutes of podcasting every single day, I'm going to podcast every single day for 5 minutes, and I'm going to do that for 10 years straight. Now you can start to say, yeah, that's probably going to take off at some point. Take off in the sense that there's going to be a following. It's going to be substantial. It's going to impact how I meet people, how people perceive me, all sorts of things, right? Likewise with music. If I say I pick up the guitar and I play for 5 minutes every day for 10 years, I'm probably not going to get worse at guitar. I'm probably not going to write less songs, right? If I say I'm going to do 5 minutes of Duolingo Spanish every single day for 10 years, after probably a year, you run out of stuff to do on Duolingo. You're probably at such a high level of just knowledge and practice and little habits that you start watching Spanish TV. You start speaking to people in Spanish. You sort them out. You find them out. You look for them. And you start to actually get to the point where you just properly speak it after, let's say, 10 years, right? And let's say Spanish is your thing, and after 2-3 years, and this is me doing the future thing, where I know it's not productive, but that's where I know, or it's not real, but I know it's all tentative, so I'm saying it loosely just to give an idea. Let's say then you get Spanish under your belt in 2-3 years. Then you move on to French. French maybe takes 1 year because it's a lot similar, to Spanish in the way that Spanish is similar to English. Let's say same thing with Italian, right? Then you move on to maybe German or Portuguese. But after 2 decades, you probably know 4 or 5 languages pretty well. And let's say you were also doing the podcast, right, every day for a minimum of 5 minutes for, the last 10, 20 years during that time. And you play guitar every day for 5 minutes minimum every day. And you also exercised for at least 5 minutes every day, or did a workout, right? um, maybe one rest day a week. But no, let's just say walk. Go for a 5-minute walk. And then I'm someone who likes working out. So I end up working out at least 2-3 days a week, like go in the gym, smack around weights, go to failure or close to with pretty good form for multiple sets until I get a pump. And then I don't like to try and then I basically, this was something I heard from Dr. Mike Israetel of Renaissance Periodization. And it's that when you're done with a workout, let's say you did a chest day, you did your chest, your triceps, and your medial deltoids. You did your shoulder. You're just normal, what is colloquially referred to as your shoulders. Not particularly your front deltoids or your front shoulder or your rear deltoids or your rear shoulder. Let's just say you did chest, shoulders, triceps, right? If those are the things that you hit, the biggest and most pumped they are should be at the end of the workout when you're done, when you're about to leave the gym. It shouldn't be that you got a super big pump and then you kept doing sets and the pump went away or degraded. That's meaning you're overtraining. So I tend to use a lot of these different proxies for good training and stimulus, but broadly speaking, good form, good technique, eccentric control, pausing in a deep stretch and keeping tension on the muscle, maximizing time under tension, making sure the target muscle is the thing under tension, using as light of weight as possible to achieve that typically, and doing similar exercises over weeks and weeks and sometimes months and months so you can actually track progression in weight. Anyways, but let's say you're learning Spanish, you're learning a language every day for 5 minutes, playing guitar every day for at least 5 minutes, you're podcasting for at least 5 minutes, and you're working out for, at least 5 minutes, and things like that. It starts to become obvious that, and let's say you stretch, just de-stress, get yourself into a better mood, get yourself into a good mental space, and you practice, saying mantras and phrases and things in the response to your thoughts, even if it's a negative incoming thought. You practice saying things back to that. You say, F this, I win. Screw this, I win. This is kind of a mantra I have, is no matter what someone says, it's kind of like, screw you, I win. Because that's the thing is over time, I'm a person. So the reason I have these kind of things, these systems, so let me get back to it. I'm a person who, my impulse is always to work hard or is to do a lot because I think a lot and experience a lot when I experience things, right? So even sitting here, I'm experiencing, how I'm setting the light, having to use the restroom a little bit, not really having to use the restroom, but the urge to urinate, right? And so all of these things, I'm experiencing all of them, experiencing a little bit of tightness in my upper chest, in my front delt, in my my lats, and it seems to be stuff due to my tricep because I hit my triceps pretty hard. But also my lats are pretty burnt. So I'm feeling that, I'm thinking that, I'm looking at the Funko Pops that are on the desk of different superheroes from when I was in high school and how I bought them, and then you start to think about mortality and like, oh my God, I had these Funko Pops. Do they even make me happy anymore? What's the point of being alive? Will I ever be happy? Those are things that I started thinking and started like going down these kind of like spirals, right? But now, anytime any of these things pop in my head, first thing I do is I get some low, relaxed breathing in. I make sure I'm exhaling. I make sure I'm inhaling. I check in on my breathing and if I'm tensing muscles needlessly, right? Once I've kind of got that box checked, usually the negative thought goes away and the negative emotion goes away. But secondarily, I say, screw you, I win. Screw you, I win. Right? So I tend to be someone who... Here's what it is. I'm going to do a lot. Period. I think that's hardwired. And so it can either be a lot of thinking or it can be a lot of doing. Right? I could sit here and I can have all these thoughts without the camera on, without my brain going, this video might look awful and it might just be an audio episode. What if this doesn't even record? Well, it doesn't matter. Because here's the thing is, the fact that I'm sitting down and doing this and recording a podcast and getting that, as something that I'm doing something. I'm not thinking. I'm not just sitting there festering, right? Because you're not bad at many things for long. In the sense that if you're doing a lot of things and you do them every single day for a year, 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it's hard after 4 years of doing something every day, and especially if there's 10 of them, for you to be bad at all 10 of them. And so it's almost guaranteed that you're going to be good at almost everything after 5 years of doing it every single day. You're going to be good. You're probably going to be really good. You're probably going to be great at it. And so there, it's like guaranteed that you're going to have positive feedback, positive input. You're going to like doing it. You're going to like the outcome. And you're going to feel good about the reward. You're also going to feel good about what you're doing. The reward's just there as a proxy to say that, yeah, I'm still doing it because it's still getting response from people. So yeah, for me, it's doing. It's making it so I do a lot of stuff instead of thinking a lot of stuff. And it's actually, there's nothing wrong with thinking a lot because I'm always going to think a lot, but I need to be doing a lot is the baseline, the thing. I need to do a lot of stuff, and then thinking is a good, healthy thing I do. If I'm not doing anything, thinking is an unhealthy activity. So I need to do a lot. That's the thing. Because I'm always going to think a lot. I need to do a lot, and then secondary, I will, of course, think a lot. But I need to do a lot. And so for me, a way to do a lot and to not get caught thinking a lot is when I'm choosing frameworks for approaching doing things, it's picking things where I go checkbox. And this is what I got from Lex Fridman and Andrew Huberman. Lex Fridman and Andrew Huberman on this podcast was Lex Fridman talking about how he makes a list of things that he's going to do every single day. Daily activities. And when you look at these daily activities, the way he said he organizes them is a checkbox. He has a list of activities, and you check, did I do them or did I not do them? They are binary. They're not multivariate. They are 0 and they are 1. Complexity is the enemy of execution. Sit with that. This is an affirmation or a mantra. That's one of my things, to read these every single day and to say them out loud. Complexity is the enemy of execution. Because here's the thing. Even if something would be on the outside characterized as being complex because it has lots of parts and lots of working pieces, if you want to actually execute on any individual part or the whole thing as a whole, you need to understand each piece to the point where it's simple. And then you understand their interconnection to the point where it's simple. And then you understand the whole thing where it's simple. It becomes simple for you to execute, and to execute confidently, and to execute well, in the sense that you actually do it fully. It needs to be simple. Complexity is the enemy of execution. That doesn't mean you don't have grand ideas, but that means they have to make sense to you. They have to make enough sense. They have to make enough sense in some way that you can say, simply put, I will do it. Because it's something that I know I will do. Something that I've decided it is worth doing. It belongs in the bucket of things to do, in the lots of things I'm going to do a lot. It belongs in that bucket of done. In do and done. And so Lex Fridman has a checklist check boxes. And he said, I think maybe it was around 11 things, and mine tends, I made one today. I was talking about, that to my brother, and I texted him. He's, I believe, at the Grand Canyon or something. And that's not relevant to you people. But I mentioned this checklist thing, and I immediately said, you know what, I should actually just make one, and I did. And it's good. And so on that list, I have a checklist, and it's just one or zero. Did I do it? Did I not do it? And the only other criteria Lex Friedman had was at least 5 minutes of whatever the activity is. That is the minimum threshold. And most often you go and you say, I just got to get to 5 minutes, and then I'm good, and I get my dopamine, I get my satisfaction, my completion. I did it. It's good, and I can move on to the next thing. So I can make sure I do a lot of things, right? And so what ends up happening, this is what Lex was reporting, is that you go to do 5 minutes of something, and by the 5th minute, you're like, well, let's do 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. And that's what happens. I never sit down and play guitar for just 5 minutes. My family knows this. Anyone's over, anyone's hanging out. My friends know this. Everyone knows this. If they're hanging out with me and they see me pick up the guitar, they go, oh, no, but we need to leave in 10 minutes. You can't. And then I have to literally tell them, okay, fine. I'm going to record just the idea that I have into voice memos. Look at my eyebrows. What is up with that? Holy cattle. Oh my God. I'm like Brian Johnson. I don't age. Oh my God. My metabolism is so low. That's good. You want a low metabolism. This video is going to take 18,000 hours to export because it's in high resolution. So yeah, that was the main framework. And this is where the Nickelback thing ties in. I saw it and I looked at it, and it looks like it just ends up being you just make music one of the things you put on your checkbox list of do, don't do. Because here's the thing, when you try and Andrew Huberman asks Lex Friedman, oh, when it comes to workout, do you track your workouts? He says, I just do a checkbox. Did I work out? Did I not work out? And that's where I go good, because the thing with that is, if you don't do that, what's the alternative? The alternative is you have some sort of multivariate thing where you can go onto these complex things and tracking progress, so to speak, and did I do good and did I do bad? And none of those things even make sense, but they're things that your brain's going to put into it, and it's going to moralize things, and you need to be weary of that, right? Because certainly there's occasions where things can be moralized, and it's useful and it's productive, and it's actually, beneficial, but it's almost never. And if it is done, your brain labels and characterizes things with moral weights, generally, or at least mine does. It does so in a manner that is almost always wrong. If there was to be some framework to assess good or bad as concepts, usually the one that my brain does as a default, and my emotions and the animal, the lizard brain does, it's usually horribly inaccurate. It's horribly useful. I mean, unuseful. It's horribly wrong. It's totally off. It mischaracterizes things, and it ends up, often going to a victim and villain sort of narrative thing. This was in the book Crucial Conversations, where they talk about this victim-villain narrative thing. And it's people tell stories, narratives about people when they're trying to have a conversation that leads it to be an unproductive conversation. It tends to be these victim and villain narratives. And it tends to be that, oh, I'm a victim or the other person's a villain. And they're not true. And even if they are true, they're not useful. They're not useful frameworks, right? And so that's something like nuance-wise you can see with people when they go to negotiate things or have conversations or try and talk things out with people, is you can always define it in such a way that you're here and I'm here and the truth is somewhere in the middle. Now, I might be right on top of the truth, and it's like almost entirely I'm at the truth, and I'm like 0.000000001% away from the truth, and you're 99.99999, right? But there still is some distance between me and my understanding and what is accurate, and there is with you. We can both agree that no one's ever 1,000% right. And so if you take that framework, likewise, you take the victim-villain framework out, you avoid the victim and villain framework anytime you see yourself doing it. And you see right here, I started getting like really like negative, and I started going like, oh, I started spiraling with what I was thinking. My brain got ahead of the words. I realized I wasn't breathing. Yeah, I like talking fast, but I don't think it's necessarily good for me. I like speaking, in rapid succession and moving through ideas quickly. But I think pausing and breathing is much better for my mental hygiene, my mental health, so to speak. So the main idea was, when you introduce complexity into these goals and these things that you say I'm going to do daily, basically we only live in the present. The past and the future aren't real. We live in the present. And if you want to, for me at least, someone with my disposition, someone who has a fast-acting mind, who's either going to think a lot and do a lot, or just think a lot and fester, the best thing is to do a lot. And the best way to do a lot without leaving ways for my brain to trick me into just thinking and preventing me, paralysis analysis they talk about, right? And so the way to make sure that the way to safeguard my commitment to action and doing from analysis and thinking and paralysis, the way to safeguard that is to make it incessantly simple and easy, and to make things binary. If I make them did it, didn't do it, I make it 0, I make it 1. If those are my only two options, then it's very, very easy for me to make progress. And then if I tell myself I'm going to make progress over a 10-year duration, then once again becomes inordinately easy for me to index value and to be biased towards action rather than inaction. Because that's the thing, is it's not thinking versus not thinking. I'm always going to think it's inaction versus action. And inaction leads to negative thoughts, leads to thoughts that are destructive. And action, at least personally speaking, anecdotally, within myself, action leads to a beautiful life, leads to enjoyment, leads to gratitude, leads to happiness, leads to kindness. So, wonderful people. That's it. That's it for today. In summary, checklist, daily checklist. How to be unstoppable. The one trick to being unstoppable is have a daily checklist that's literally yes or no. Did I do it? Did I not do it? And the only requirement is that you did it for at least 5 minutes, and then you get to check that box. Carefully vet what things you put on that list. But once you do it, and you stick with it to at least 26 days in a row, those will become habits. Those will be hardwired habits. 26 days in a row, hardwired habits. I might name this 1 out of 26. Even though this is probably the 50th episode or something by the podcast by now, The Rock Show with Connor Farrell. You're welcome, by the way, The Rock Show with Connor Farrell. I might label this 1 out of 26. And yeah, I'm fairly certain I'm going to podcast every day, and that's going to be the framework which works for me. Because I know it won't not work. I know there's no way that I podcast for 5 minutes, 6 days in a row, and then I do a good, like, big, long podcast the 7th day. There's no way that I don't end up doing at least a 20, 30, 15-minute podcast every day. Or most days. And then, most days I would end up doing an hour. I love talking. I had a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. I did barely touched on the Nickelback stuff. I mean, the Nickelback stuff is simple. You just do it. It's all action. That's what I took away from that. Same with rock music, same with podcasting, same with everything, same with everything, same with all of it. And the thing is, I'm a multi-hyphenate. I'm a genius. I'm a rock star. I'm a podcast host. I'm colloquially speaking a funny man. And I am, broadly speaking, jacked and handsome and articulate and charismatic. Neurotic, of course, because I'm Jewish. But once again, that's another superpower. That means I control everything. And I run the world. So what's not to love about that? No, but yeah. So it's kind of weird, personally speaking, with this dichotomy where I know it's inevitable that I'm shockingly successful in almost any metric you could come up with for what success is. It's inevitable that probably in I would say, yeah, like a decade from now, by the time I'm 31, yeah, 31, I'm going to be a staggering success. Maverick, Titan of industry, whatever you like to call it. And it's interesting taking, I just know logically speaking, I'm going to do the checkbox thing. And when I make a thing, I do a thing, right? I picked that I was going to do One Punch. In the show One Punch, the joke is he does 100. Ow, that really hurt. I bit my tongue. Wow. He does 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 bodyweight squats every day and runs 10 kilometers. I started working my way up to doing that. And I did it every single day. Because when you say I'm going to do it every day, you end up doing it every day. And I got to a point where I realized, I should probably lift weights. And then I wasn't doing the cardio. I stopped doing the cardio, just cold, because I didn't have a goal with it. I didn't have anything that excited me about it. But I consciously chose to stop, right? I didn't make an impulsive decision. The habit, the impulse, the desire was to just keep doing what I'm doing. That's kind of the human thing, right? So, yeah. Yeah, so that's just a little anecdote. It's hard, it's interesting to try and contextualize the fact that it's inevitable that I'm going to be, I already am hugely successful. It's interesting because I already am hugely successful, highly intelligent, highly talented. I'm working on singing. Oh, that's one of the things. Yeah, singing for 5 minutes each day. I've completely not lost control of my voice, but I used to have a much more fluid command in terms of singing. And that's gone away, but I'm also going to start running again, and that's going to improve my lung capacity and all sorts of things, and working on breathing, working on singing, working on running. I'm going to work on all of it, and I'm going to be unstoppable, and I'm going to be amazing, and you're going to love it. You're going to love it. You already do. And yeah. So yeah, checklist. The past and the future are lies. And I'm doing the checklist thing in 5 minutes minimum a day. I'm going to see how that works. But yeah, it feels like people who have the most similar balancing act of interests and ideas in how to juxtapose different approaches to different fields. Feels like someone like Andrew Huberman and Lex Friedman and some of these people I can relate to the most because they're dealing with the most similar conceptual framework challenges, right? How do you mesh together approaches to thinking about things or frameworks of thinking about things in 4 different disciplines where, different philosophies that about, what even in life is worth doing are completely different. The meaning to life is to do good science. The meaning to life is to grow a business. The meaning to life is to be as jacked as possible. The meaning to life is to make the most honest music. The meaning to life is to make the most successful commercially music. The meaning to life is to make a community around you. The meaning to life is to have a small homestead. The meaning to life is to have as many kids as possible. The meaning to life is to make as much money as possible. The meaning to life is to start a country and to fix the political system in a nation, right? All these different things that people could say, right? So it's like, how do you navigate that? And so feels like the people who can relate to navigating that the most tend to be people like Andrew Huberman and Lex Friedman. So it's kind of who Breathman. I just farted. Ew. Oh my God, I did it again. Well, on that note, I'm going to end. I'm going to use the restroom. But yeah, thank you guys for listening to The Rock Show with Connor Farrell. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.